In California, United States, we will meet a couple named Leandro and Joanna, who met when they were very young and got married after 2 years of dating. They got married in the church. They thought they loved each other at first, and a few months later, Leandro and Joanna had their first child, whom they named James. The boy was the joy of that couple, but over time, things started to fall apart, mainly because Joanna always encouraged Leandro to have a little more ambition and start his own business to have a better life. However, Leandro, who worked as an employee in a construction company, said that the little he invested was to pay the household bills, buy food, and invest in their child's future. Joanna, on her own, decided to venture into earning her own money and ended up finding a job as a secretary in a company. Leandro was happy that his wife could take the reins to achieve something, and that eventually led to their distancing and causing the first arguments. James was just a boy and did not understand his wife's behavior and distancing. But on an unexpected day, when Leandro left work, a friend of Leandro approached him and said he had seen his wife Joanna dining at a restaurant with a very elegant man. Leandro didn't believe what his friend said, but the friend insisted and decided to take Leandro to the place. To his surprise, what his friend was telling was true. Joanna was being unfaithful, and Leandro was perplexed by that sight. At that moment, the friend told Leandro that he would be a witness to a case if necessary, but the man was so shaken that he decided to do something different. He would surprise them that same day. Joanna arrived home and even greeted her husband Leandro, who, on the other hand, responded coldly and almost expressionless. Leandro asked, discreetly, "How was your day, dear? Did you work a lot all day?" Joanna replied nervously, "Yes, dear, there's something wrong." But inside, Leandro wanted to tell the truth to Joanna, but he was holding back. He watched the encounters between his wife and her lover, and at that moment, on an unexpected day, Leandro left both of them. When Joanna saw her husband approaching, seemingly disguised, and her lover too, at that moment, Leandro, with a fake smile, said, "Hello, dear, who is your friend?" And Joanna, discreetly, says, "He's just a colleague, my love, we were talking here." He even greeted the lover, who was polite and even kind. Leandro bid them farewell amiably and asked them to have dinner at their house on a weekend. The lover said he would accept. After Leandro started to distance himself and bid farewell amiably, Joanna and her lover became nervous about almost being caught red-handed, but what they didn't know was that Leandro already knew the truth and was just pretending not to know. That same day, when Joanna arrived home, she hugged and greeted her husband and said her friend would come over the weekend. Leandro looked falsely at his wife, and on that weekend, as promised, that man came. He introduced himself and said his name was Daniel. He was a colleague of his wife's and they were discussing professional matters. Taking advantage of their young son James playing at a neighbor's house, Leandro confronted the two and said confidently to their faces, "You two don't need to pretend. Stop being fake, because I know you're not just work friends." And at that moment, Joanna, astonished, asks, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy? What's gotten into you?" Leandro threw on the table, to the astonishment of Joanna and Daniel, several photos of places where they were having their hidden love affair, restaurants, parks, cinemas, and even hotel entrances. Daniel and Joanna were astonished to find out they had been discovered. They thought Leandro would kill them right there. To their surprise, Leandro simply asked me, tell me with all sincerity, without hiding anything, since when have you and Daniel been cheating on me? I have the right to know." At that moment, Daniel said he regretted it and that Joanna had nothing to do with it. He had fallen in love with her and was convincing her to ask for gifts, as he knew their marriage was not going well at the time. Joanna, ashamed but firm, said, "Listen, Leandro, I'm sorry you found out this way, but I was going to tell you." Leandro said that if she wanted to separate, she could ask for whatever she wanted now. He said it should spread all over the world, but, shaking his head, he said he would give her the divorce and she could be happy with whoever she wanted, as long as she didn't ask for alimony or anything like that and could share custody of their child. Above all, he wanted to protect his son from such a bombshell and not have a bad image of his mother. But if Joanna demanded alimony, he would expose those photos in court and show the real cause of the separation. Daniel said he regretted that a marriage had ended like this, but you can't control the heart, and that Joanna was the woman of his life and that he was willing to take a beating for her, if necessary. Daniel even asked Leandro to beat him right there if that would make him feel better, but Leandro said that would only make him as low and miserable as he was. He wanted nothing more to do with them at that moment. Leandro saw how crazy Daniel was about his now ex-wife, and it seemed to him that he wasn't a bad man in his eyes. Daniel, that same day, helped Joanna pack all her belongings and they took them to his house. Soon after, the divorces were declared. Joanna did not ask for alimony since she was the one who was unfaithful. Leandro just cried and was completely devastated. Later on, he found out that his wife's lover was not just a mere company employee, but a well-off family man with a lot of money, and that's why Joanna ended up falling in love with him. With the divorce declared, it didn't take long for Joanna and Daniel to get married, although they made an agreement for the sake of little James, who would spend weekends with his father and the rest of the time with his mother. Leandro began to become emotionally ill and was diagnosed with depression, which made him distant from his son. In this moment of vulnerability, it was when he met someone who would change his life, a young nurse named Laura, who was a widow and had a son. Laura was a great emotional support who helped Leandro out of the chaotic situation he was living in. She helped Leandro with his depression and with antidepressants. She was being an emotional support. Even after marrying Joanna, she became pregnant and gave Daniel a pair of daughters, which delighted the couple and James, who spent time with them. After distancing himself from his father, whom he didn't know was suffering from depression, he spent that time at his stepfather's mansion, who, surprisingly, treated the boy very well and spoiled him a lot, but also educated him in his own way. Joanna was happy in her new life, although sometimes she thought about her ex-husband, not because she felt something for him, but because of the situation of not overcoming their separation. Joanna and Daniel decided to stay away from him, but they only saw him for the sake of their son James. As time passed and contact was re-established, Leandro and Laura ended up falling in love. And thanks to this woman and her little son named Bill, Leandro saw life with different eyes. On weekends when he was spending time, Leandro saw that his son had changed a lot and almost didn't accept the gifts his father gave him. He told the boy that his stepfather's gifts were very good too, but out of respect, he accepted them. He even had a good relationship with his stepmother Laura and her son. The boy said that his twin brothers were very beautiful and he loved taking care of them, and that his stepfather said he should learn to be a good brother. This made Leandro angry to see that Daniel and Joanna treated his son as if he were a nanny for their daughters, preferring to take care of their children. It was at that moment that Leandro called his ex-wife and confronted them both on this issue of exploiting their son. But Daniel got the message, but he argued that Leandro was being too radical, preventing his son from having contact with his siblings. And Joanna also said that this was just Leandro's invention to avoid causing trouble between them. Daniel and Joanna eventually gave in to Leandro's request, but over time James wasn't very accustomed to his father's simple lifestyle and would say that his stepfather always allowed him the freedom to do new things. When his father offered hot dogs and soda to his son, the boy refused, saying that his stepfather had mentioned that it contains fat and that he had enrolled him in a swimming school, and they were following a diet prescribed by a nutritionist. Leandro, amazed at how strangely his son was behaving, quite different from his wife Laura's son, who was a loving and respectful boy dedicated to Leandro's simple style. Laura observed how her stepson seemed like a spoiled and completely strange child, and with time, it would only get worse. Each passing year, James grew more distant from his father, while Bill became much closer. Leandro tried to treat his current wife's son and his ex-wife's son as equals, without distinction, although James and Bill had some interaction. Soon, a personal rivalry would begin to emerge over time, as Bill didn't agree with the way James treated his father, and James saw Bill as too square. He thought Bill was the legitimate son, as Bill wasn't his real son. This left Bill somewhat sad, but Leandro saw his stepson crying in the corner and gently asked the boy, "My dear, what happened?" Bill retorted sadly to Leandro, "Mr. Leandro, I know I'm not your son, but still, I care about you." At that moment, Leandro told Bill, who had said such nonsense, that Bill was his son too since he was raising him. Leandro decided to draw his son's attention to respecting his wife's son and not to speak nonsense. But he spoke to his son in the gentlest and friendliest way possible, and after the weekend passed, James returned to his mother's company on Monday. Leandro received a call from his ex-wife, Joanna, who told him over the phone that he had been rude to their son and should be more friendly. Leandro countered that James was humiliating his stepson, and he showed his son that this was wrong. Joanna said Leandro was making their coexistence a storm in a teacup. They ended up arguing over the phone, and Leandro hung up on his ex-wife. In this moment of sadness, Laura moved out of Leandro's house and said, "Love, don't feel bad about it. I understand how difficult it is, but it seems like your son is becoming just another miniature version of his alleged stepfather. But Bill and I will always be here to support you." Leandro replied, "Yes, dear, I realize that maybe while I was dealing with depression, it might have influenced my son in some way." They hugged and sought to support each other. But every day, as time passed, James began to act stranger. When James turned 17, he and his mother came to visit his father. Joanna said the matter was important. James explained that the situation was important, and Joanna explained that Leandro should renounce his parental rights so that Daniel could adopt him as a son and include him in his inheritance, along with his twins. This left Leandro indignant and sad, and he said to his son James, "Are you kidding me? How dare you ask me something like that?" Joanna added, "It's a simple thing, Leandro. You're not thinking about our son's future." James continued, "Daniel is being much more of a father to me. He gives me everything, and this is a chance to have a great future." Leandro was indignant at such audacity from his son and his ex-wife, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Joanna argued that this was an occurrence of a betrayed man and not of someone who had overcome the past. James did everything to convince his father, even resorting to humiliation, and Joanna just watched all of this. It was very sad. Leandro struggled to maintain his rights, but James was relentless and remained firm in what he wanted. After much insistence and tired of that fight, Leandro finally gave in and went to a notary where he signed the documents renouncing his parental rights. This further shook Leandro, but for Joanna and James, this was gratifying. Leandro began to feel those same problems of depression and sadness again, and Laura and Bill were there for him despite everything. Laura gave Leandro some very good news: she was pregnant. This relieved some of Leandro's sadness at losing a child, but another one was on the way, and Bill was also happy to know that he would have a little brother or sister. From that day on, James and Joanna had no more contact with Leandro and didn't want to know about him. The news of the pregnancy gave Leandro a new incentive for life. With Laura's help in her nursing job, Leandro enrolled in medical school. With the support and motivation of his wife Laura and his stepson Bill, he would start a new chapter in his life. After completing the pregnancy, Laura gave birth to a boy they named Tommy, which filled the couple with joy. As time passed, with Laura's collaboration and Bill's encouragement and support, Leandro graduated from medical school and became a renowned professional. He credited his success to his stepson and his wife, who motivated him to move forward. Leandro was a renowned and influential professional, and even in his 40s, he achieved his dreams. Leandro, Laura, Bill, and Tommy were very happy, but soon a ghost from the past would reappear in his life. On a day when Laura and Tommy had to go out to visit someone, Leandro was at home researching some surgical methods, and Bill was studying in his room. Someone knocked on the door, and to his surprise, an elegant and well-dressed young man was there. The young man was none other than James. He greeted Leandro and said he wanted to talk to him at that moment. Leandro was thrilled to see his son there and even thought he wanted to re-establish contact after so many years. But soon all that excitement would collapse when the young man would ask for something quite unusual. At that moment, Leandro said excitedly, "Hello, who is alive always appears. What brings you here after so many years? And why did you come now?" And at that moment, with some authority, James replied to his father, "I know it's been a long time, but I see that now you have a new life, looking good and a famous doctor, with a beautiful house and surely loaded. I would like to ask you to help invest in my wedding and invite you to participate in this important moment in your life, because you owe me that." At that moment, all of Leandro's emotion and feelings disappeared, and indignation took over. Leandro replied coldly to his son, "And why don't you ask your stepfather to pay for your wedding? Because Daniel is responsible for you now." And James told Leandro that his stepfather was going through a financial crisis in his fortune, since his mother didn't have much money available. Also because Daniel was saving money for his twin brother's university and was cutting expenses, as his stepfather paid for his administration degree. James said he had always followed Leandro on social media, that he got married, has a new family, and even became a renowned businessman, and now could invest and get back in touch. Upon hearing what his son James said, with deep indignation and old wounds reopened, Leandro replied, "Listen well, James. Do you think you can come here asking me for favors? Have you forgotten that you asked me to waive my parental rights to be part of your stepfather's inheritance? And now that he's struggling, you come to me, very mistaken. James, if you think I'm going to help someone who was ungrateful and traded me for another father, I'm not the same as before and I won't help you." And when James grasped what his father said, he replied indignantly, "You abandoned me, and how can you throw that in my face? I thought you had overcome that and matured, but I see I was wrong. Daniel is my stepfather, but you are my biological father and should be happy to reconnect. A registration document is more important than genuine paternal love." Leandro couldn't contain himself with his son's accusations and said he no longer had obligations to him once he waived his parental rights. Neither did James have the right to demand anything from him, nor did Leandro have the right to demand anything more. Leandro said he never forgave this betrayal and that he was worse than Judas in his betrayal. And Leandro even added that he didn't inherit his blood, but his mother's dirty blood, Joanna. Disgusted, James replied, "Don't speak like that about my mother. I don't know why you refer to her in that way. From what I've heard, you two didn't get along with each other. And also, you didn't do enough for me. I ceased to be your son on paper, but biologically, you're my father and still have obligations to me." There were many exchanges of barbs between Leandro and James. The discussion was so intense that from his room, Bill chose to intervene to help his stepfather and said to James, "Listen, man, leave Leandro alone. I won't let you insult my father like this with these accusations." And ironically laughing, James replied, "Now I understand, Daddy. Why don't you want to invest in my wedding, something you could do? You found a replacement for me. Listen, you're an orphan bastard and not my father's son. I am his son." At that moment, rage took hold of Bill, and he put aside his manners and punched James in the face. James was taken aback by this and went after Bill. The two ended up grappling with each other, and Leandro ended up breaking up the fight and sending James away from his house. The young man, with wounded pride, left Leandro's house and went away. At that moment, Bill hugged Leandro and said, "I'm sorry, Leandro, but I couldn't contain myself having this guy abuse you, offend you, and offend my late father. It was too much for me. I want you to know that I will always be here for you, along with my mother and my little brother, Tommy. I'll never leave you aside. I'll always be with you because you raised me since I was a child." And Leandro replied emotionally, "Don't worry, Bill. This ungrateful indeed never wanted me. That's why I have no obligations to him. He renounced me, so I have no reasons to help him." When Laura and Tommy arrived at their house and saw that mess, she said gently, "Love, what happened here?" At that moment, gently, Leandro asked his son Tommy to go play in his room, and the obedient boy went. Then, Leandro and Bill told Laura everything that happened in her absence, James's unexpected visit, the ugly argument between them, and the fight. At that moment, Laura, outraged, said, "Love, this can't continue. I think you should ask for a restraining order against this guy, so he won't bother us again. What a nerve this guy has." Leandro said he would wait for the dust to settle and see where all this would lead before making any hasty decisions. At that moment, the three of them were having a family moment with little Tommy. Until the phone rang and Bill offered to answer. When he answered, the voices of forgotten ghosts spoke. Joan and Daniel were on the other end of the line. They questioned the story of them being expelled and beaten by their son, James. At that moment, Bill ironically said, "So, you're the ex-wife of Leandro, and you're the rich lover for whom you dumped him. My father told me everything about you. How dare you call him after so long without contact?" At that moment, astonished, Joanna said, "Listen, young man, you assaulted my son, and Leandro had nothing to do with it. This is a family matter, and my husband and I want to know why you assaulted my son." At that moment, Bill said to the couple, "Listen, there are no secrets in our family. You ruined Leandro, even going so far as to relate his son to your lover. And now you think you have the right to demand explanations? Absolutely not, madam. Your son deserved the beating I gave him, and it was for his own good. Leave Leandro alone and live your lives." At that moment, it was Daniel's turn to speak to Bill and said, "Guy, pass me the phone to your stepfather now. We were encouraging him to reconnect with his son, and this is how you treat him. Call him now." At that moment, Bill said, "And are you the lover of Leandro's ex-wife?" "I'll call him, but I doubt he wants to talk to you." Daniel and Joanna waited on the line while Bill went to call Leandro without him knowing. Bill asked Laura and Leandro to come with him and spoke privately. He explained the whole situation, and when he heard that Joanna and Daniel, who had never had contact with him for a long time, Leandro spoke to both of them and said over the phone, "Joanna and Daniel, what do you two want with me? I was doing fine until you showed up in my life again. I have nothing to do with your lives anymore. Leave me alone." Indignant, Joanna said, "Listen, Leandro," James explained the whole story. "You should be happy that your son could contact you. I thought this could be a new beginning, and you've shown that you're still stuck in the past. How dare you say those things to our son's face? He said it all. Tell me now." At that moment, Leandro replied firmly, "I am no longer his father on paper. Now he is your and Daniel's responsibility. I have nothing more to do with this. I'm not going to pay for his wedding, and I'm not going to invest everything I had to do for him. I've already done it. He inherited your selfish and treacherous behavior. He didn't inherit anything good from me." Joanna felt embarrassed and shocked. What did Leandro say? At that moment, Daniel spoke and said, "Listen, Leandro, I never stopped you from seeing him. You decided to stay with us on your own. We encouraged contact for a long time. I'm going through a financial crisis, and I can't sacrifice my twins' university paying for his wedding. Help your son now, and when I recover from this crisis, I'll return this money with interest and corrections. You should reconnect with your son." With all courage, Leandro said, "Please, stop tormenting me and my family. Until now, I've hidden the reason for Joanna and my separation, but if you continue to bother me, I'll tell him the reason and end it once and for all. I have evidence and witnesses, and you know that. I don't want to destroy the image you have of yourselves, but if you keep bothering me, I'll tell." And at that moment, very embarrassed and shaken, Joanna said reluctantly, "Okay, you win. Neither Daniel nor I will bother you anymore. We'll figure out a way to pay for James's wedding ourselves." Leandro replied satisfactorily, "That's better. And I don't want any of you coming to me anymore. If you do, I'll get a restraining order against you. You're doing this for my well-being and for the well-being of my family." Now, James is your responsibility, Joanna, not mine." So, goodbye. With a trembling farewell, they both hung up the phone. Leandro stayed with Laura and Bill, questioning if he did the right thing. But Laura comforted Leandro, saying they followed this path and chose it. Leandro was thinking about his well-being, and distancing himself from those who betrayed him was the best. Reluctantly, Daniel ended up paying for James's wedding and sacrificed the college fund for his twins. The boy was happy, though he noticed his stepfather and mother didn't seem pleased. Over time, the financial crisis was resolved, and Daniel and Joanna started saving money again for their sister's college fund. He was already happy with his family, and to avoid confusion and exposure on social media, Leandro, Laura, and Bill blocked James, Joanna, and Daniel on social media, preventing them from seeing their status. For their own good and for the preservation of Leandro's mental health, some time later, Bill met a woman whom he married, and Leandro and Laura were happy. Eventually, James decided to check his father's social media out of curiosity and found he was blocked on all platforms. He even tried calling him, but the number was blocked. However, when he saw Bill's profile through a friend's account, James was shocked to see that his father had paid for his half-brother's wedding. He seemed happy for the newlyweds. At that moment, James said to himself, "He paid for that bastard's wedding, but he decided to pay for mine." Those count, James decided not to bother his father anymore and finally let him go. Leandro and Laura were happy and managed to raise little Tommy skillfully, avoiding the mistakes made with James. This was a way to prevent past mistakes. As for Joanna and Daniel, they were living in their castle of illusion. Though very troubled by having destroyed James and Leandro's relationship as father and son because of their love, they decided to leave the couple alone and live their lives, carrying that sin in their souls and seeking to give their twins and James a dignified life. The relationship worked out, but the cost was very high. A reflection we can draw from this story is that betrayal is a deep wound that can be inflicted in various ways, even by people we wouldn't expect to hurt us, such as members of our own family. It's a painful experience that shakes not only the trust we have in others, but also the trust we have in ourselves and in the world around us. In the end, Leandro's attitude shows that it's important to establish boundaries for safety and protect oneself from negative influences, even if it means facing strong conflicts. His decision to prioritize his own well-being and that of his family is an example of courage and self-sufficiency. If you liked this story, leave your comments here with your opinion, and of course, give it a like and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. A big hug, and see you soon.